Welcome to this first meeting of the Waste Strategy Implementation Subcommittee. Can I remind everyone that this meeting will be recorded and will be available for public listening. Also, can I ask members to ensure their phones are turned on to silent. The first thing we have to do is Sederunt apologies, so can I ask Tracy to take us through. While we're here, Stephen Herrick was supposed to be here, but he's in a meeting with the Director of Communities talking about other things at the moment, so James is going to stand in for him. Our clerk is Tracy and our committee administrator is Joanne, so thank you for your support. Can I also say to the Eco-Deco plant people, thank you very much for the visit this morning. I think it was well received by members, and I'm sure we'll have some discussion later on in one of the items. So Tracy, Sederunt, apologies. Thank you, Chairman.
We've got 7 members present, and not present at the moment as Councillors Drysdale, Giusti, Johnston and Sloan.
Ian?
So the 3 Conservative members will be here shortly, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? No. Okay. We'll then go on to item number 3, which is the Delegation to Waste Strategy Implementation Subcommittee report by Director of Communities, and this report is to provide information on the delegation to the subcommittee, being to monitor and oversee the implementation of the new waste strategy and make recommendations to the Communities Committee on this implementation to improve arrangements and service performance. You've got anything to add to that, James?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair.
Okay, members, have we got anything to say to that report? Are we happy to note the remit of the Waste Strategy Implementation Subcommittee as detailed at paragraph 3.2? Thank you very much. We'll then go on to item number 4, which is the Waste Strategy Implementation Update, report by Heads of Roads and Infrastructure. We've had the site visit to the Eco-Deco Mechanical Biological Treatment Facility, known as the Eco-Deco or MBT, and I think it was useful that so many of this subcommittee could attend and see the operations. Thanks to Dave and his team for explaining the process that happens with the waste and also showing us to the control room. It was also useful to understand some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that exist with the treatment process now it's managed in-house. This will be covered further in the presentation, and James McLeod and his colleagues are now going to give that presentation to bring us up to speed with where the project team have got to and all the decisions that EE&I committee have made over the last year, along with the opportunity to discuss the paper being taken to Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee this time next week. And James and his team will be happy to take questions during the presentations. So can I ask you to give us the presentation, James?
Does that work? Yeah, great. Okay, so thank you, Chair. I'm James McLeod, Infrastructure Manager with the authority, and currently leading a small team on developing the waste strategy for the council. A presentation today to go through a number of items, and as the Chair said, an opportunity to take questions during the presentation or keep them to the end. I'm quite easy on that. I have a number of colleagues here who can also come in with more detailed information. Just for introduction, I think it's important that you know who's here, just so that you understand that this isn't by any means my work. It's a lot of work from a lot of people. Moira Weatherup, Chris Gibson, Ralph Steedman, Kirk Telfer, Janice Ireland and Adrian Pringle have all been working with a team, so they all have different roles, and as the questions come, I'm sure I will defer to their better skills and experience to answer some of these things. So I wanted to run through, because I appreciate that a number of you haven't been involved in the EEI committee in the past, and there's been 3 committees in the last in less than a year that have taken some decisions that I think are important in understanding where the strategy is developing. It's led to a request to Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee, which is the committee next week, which is looking for funding to continue to develop the strategy. So it's worth sort of talking through the decisions that are being taken there. Quite a number of you are actually on that committee as well, so we'll have seen the papers. I talk a little bit about the Zero Waste Park and the development of that, some of the communication strategy elements that we're doing, community conversations that will come forward, transformation events, and a little bit about future committee reports. So a team was established earlier this year looking to develop a flexible waste collection and disposal strategy and reported to committee in May and July of this year. This comes off the back of principally the termination of the waste PFI contract, the decision taken by full council in September last year, and since November 2018 that the council's been operating the facility which you all visited earlier. We've also brought in-house with that the running of the 10 HWRCs that were the responsibility of Renewy. That adds to the 2 facilities that the council had at Stranraer and at Newton Stewart. Finally, the contract also had within it the closure and remediation of 5 landfill sites, and that now is the responsibility of the authority. So a little bit about the legislation, I'll just keep this quite brief. Environmental Protection Act 1990 then led to the Waste Scotland Regulations 2012, which amends the Act and obviously more relevant to Scotland. That had one of the requirements of that was the curbside collection, requirement for curbside collection, which our council was, despite attempts to change the contract, the Waste PFI contract, was unable to do with the exception of the Wigton area. So now that that has fallen away, we have that opportunity. The Code of Practice for Household Recycling in Scotland sets out a lot of the information with regards to curbside collection. And the charter to which we are a signatory was signed by the former leader and the chief executive, and that sort of that gives a commitment to comply with the Code of Practice. And as we discussed this morning at the MBT, a landfill ban on biodegradable municipal waste from the 1st of January, you're aware that the MBT itself has a big impact on the amount going to landfill because of the process and work that's done through the facility in the drying, the shredding and drying, and then the refinements means a lot of it's diverted from landfill, a high percentage diverted from landfill. Finally, the impacts of the deposit return scheme, the DRS, estimated to be in place by mid-2021. Certainly the intention is to have it before the next Scottish parliamentary elections, to have something in place for DRS. Whether it will be fully rolled out by then or whether it will be in part established in statute remains to be seen. So I think just running quickly through decisions from the 23rd of November. So at the 23rd of November, it's quite an operational report, but has seen some changes which start to bring us in line a little bit more with the Code of Practice. So the cessation of the sale of white bags, side waste bags. The disadvantage of having a lot of side waste is that it makes it hard to route plan for the vehicles. I think in one route we picked up over 500 white bags, side waste bags. That's obviously a lot of manual handling, but it's also meaning the vehicles need to return to tip more often. So the cessation of that, reducing the available waste for just general disposal, means people are encouraged to recycle more. We did some minor stuff on additional wheelie bins, assisted pull-out service. We're starting the removal of additional bins where they're not required. We looked to increase the cost of the supply of new bins to cover the actual cost that they were getting. And members agreed to receive a report on the road end policy, and I'll come to that a little bit at the end of the presentation. We noted the increased costs associated with new builds, so a lot of new property built in Dumfries and Galloway, and obviously that increased the cost of the collection service. And we trialled we've been trialling the use of seagull-proof bags. So the picture there, you can see the bag at the propped against the property front. Within that is just a normal waste bag for people without wheelie bins, less susceptible to rats or, to be honest with you, seagulls is the main problem, particularly in Dumfries, as you'll be aware. And that's actually been reasonably successful. The 14th of May committee was after the establishment of the group, the small project team. So it has started to establish what the decisions were going forward in terms of a collection service. So the first one, all Wigton properties to receive a single dry recyclates collection system. So for those of you not aware, there have been over the years since we've operated the Wigton dry recyclates collection system have been an attempts to trial more efficient operations. So the very original collection service involved a lot of curbside sorting from the staff. We've changed that over time because it's very time consuming. A lot of manual sort of separate, putting hands into boxes where there could be sharps and things like that. And in fact, the value that's obtained by sorting curbside is not realised by the costs that are incurred by having to do a lot of curbside sorting. So a move towards one box has one material, one box has another material, third box has another material, and that allows the operatives to tip the waste into the vehicle, into the storages on the vehicle. Because we've been operating different systems for different areas, trialling them out, the agreement was to go to a single system of glass in one box, metals and plastics in the second box, paper and card in the third box. So that it was just a simple tip into the storages on the vehicles. In terms of the other decisions we agreed going forward, we agreed for the collection service, and I'll explain this a little bit further, was option 2 and not option 1. Option 1 was slightly more cost effective, was not code compliant, and clearly to ensure that we are code compliant and greatly increase our chances of continued funding, we want to move towards a code compliant service. The opportunity to not collect glass at curbside was quite important to us, and one of the main decisions around that was that there isn't a requirement to collect glass at curbside. It can be collected at bottle banks, but going forward with the deposit return scheme, which will come in the future, the estimations are in the order of 90% of glass within the recycling market, within the recycling system, is deposit return eligible. So in other words, if you've got a bottle of wine or a bottle of beer or a bottle of Coke, you will get 20 pence deposit back on that. If we set up a curbside collection service to collect this glass, and in a year and a half, 2 years' time, everybody's taking that glass back to the supermarket for a 20 pence deposit, we've set up a collection service which is going to collect nothing. So the reason for going for community bring sites means those bins will fill up over time with things like jam jars that are non-deposit return, and we can empty them to suit when they're full, rather than running a service every fortnight or every 6 weeks to collect glass curbside. We agreed, furthermore, to collect food only from the 6 regulated postcode areas. So the requirements from the Code of Practice says you can be limited to areas which are higher density. So that in Dumfries and Galloway is Stranraer, Dumfries, trying to remember this, Dalbeattie, Annan, Gretna and Lockerbie. Looking for a confirmation. Yep, so those are the 6 areas. You heard this morning that the food waste within the MBT is a benefit to the processing within the MBT. It's not critical, but it is a benefit to the processing within the MBT. That may change. Regulations may change at a national level on what we're required to go, where we're required to go. So you'll see Dalbeattie was in there, Castle Douglas wasn't in there. That's a quirk of the way that the areas are set up. We will deal with that, but if we stick to code compliant, which is a recommendation from Zero Waste Scotland as well, stick to a code compliant approach. If there's a change in the code and in the requirements, then we will deal with as it comes forward. But the savings in terms of cost of in the order of £800,000 of driving around and collecting, in staffing and vehicles and things like that, but also the environmental cost of driving a lot of additional mileages. So we can offer alternatives. So for compostable food waste, the opportunity to use compost and home composting as opposed to having food waste collected. Agreed to further reports on the operating hours of the HWRCs. A number of years ago, the HWRCs, there was an alignment of the opening hours. That was then pulled back and Renewy went back to the old opening hours. And some of you will be aware that different places have very different hours. Dalbeattie only opens at the weekend for 4 hours on each day. Somewhere like Whithorn opens quite long hours, probably 7 days a week, something like that. The details of this will be provided, but principally, we will be in the position where the 4 main centres will look to open for 7 days a week, from morning till evening, and the remaining 8 smaller HWRCs would look to have a 5-day week, so not opening on a Monday or a Tuesday, but opening Wednesday through to Monday, not opening on a Tuesday and Wednesday, but opening Thursday through to Monday, and generally for 6 hours, so that we can have a single person operation, which keeps the cost down. 6 hours doesn't require a break. If you have a break, you need to either have 2 people or you need to shut the site in the daytime, and that's difficult. So, and the agreement to a communications plan. Noted the DRS, noted the concerns over the collection service in the West, which is the reason for moving to option 2. Noted the need to cease the task and finish working practices that our bin crews have, and the potential implementation of a 4-day week, and noticed the issues in terms of the condition of the RCV fleet, and the need to acquire at that stage 11 new vehicles. That was to allow us to do the residual waste collection. But we'll see as it's developed, we're looking to acquire a full fleet of vehicles. 2nd of July, a little bit more refined report. Look to develop the strategy, having agreed it, the way forward at the previous committee. Agreed a timetable for stakeholder engagement and the arrangements for the stakeholder engagement, community conversation events across the 12 wards. And at that time we noted that investment would be brought to the Finance Committee, that there would be issues around the Scottish Government funding, and that these would be clarified before going to Finance Committee. And that an additional note was added. It wasn't in the recommendations, but it was that this would be reported to a future waste subcommittee. So here we are. So just to remind members, the proposed collection service utilises a single RCV, so there's no different curbside collection vehicles. The RCV is a single-bodied RCV, so it just has one lift on the back, or 2 lifts on the back going into one compartment. And in week 1, this is a schematic. In week 1, we would be collecting residual waste, so black bag waste. Week 2, we'd be collecting the first waste stream of recyclates, so that would be paper and card, or metals and plastics. It doesn't really matter. It'll alternate. It'll be different for different people. Residual waste again on week 3, and on week 4, the other dry recyclate. And as you can see, glass would be brought to community bring sites, and food waste would continue to be collected on a weekly basis, but only from the 6 regulated postcode areas. And within metals and plastics, we would also take the Tetra Packs, which would be part of the code compliance. So going forward, members of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee, it doesn't trip off the tongue in the same way as the previous name did. But members of this committee next week will receive a request to agree a capital investment of 8.2 million for waste collection service. Now, the way we're proposing to manage the capital investment in the vehicles is associated, rather than borrowing capital for a long period of time, the intention is to borrow the capital for the lifespan of the vehicles. So the 8.2 million buys the new vehicles required, and the equating to the 1.492 million annual repayment means that during the 5 years the vehicles are bought back, are paid off fully. At the end of 5 years, the vehicles are still worth 30% of what they were. We will get a 30% buyback, which will help fund the next lot of vehicles. So what we're saying is that we won't be in the position that we'll end up with very, very old vehicles being operated and the asset being sweated fully. There's an acceptance that vehicles need to be replaced on a reasonably regular basis. It also potentially allows us to buy into new technology in 5 years' time with maybe more electric RCVs or hydrogen RCVs. 200,000 from the Waste Review Reserve, so that was the PFI sinking fund, to continue to fund the zero waste park design. And the note to the notes here show that there is a current shortfall in the budget, but options are being developed to further reduce costs, and we'll discuss some of those later in the presentation. That the Scottish Government have a strategic waste fund of 3.2 million that comes to this authority, and that's off the back of the waste PFI contract, and that there's continued discussions going forward with Scottish Government in terms of the continuing to receive that full amount. The need of a capital investment of around 30 million in the zero waste park, These figures, the reason for the noting this is that these figures are at an early stage, and I'll come a little bit to that. And finally, the project rectification costs that were agreed at committee in September when the full council took the decision to terminate the PFI contract. These are the rectification costs for the HWRCs, repairs to HWRCs, and investment in the Eco-Deco MBT. In terms of the Dumfries Zero Waste Park, so the capital costs that will be presented to for the Zero Waste Park include a new household waste recycling centre. So I'll mention this at the end of the presentation, but the household waste recycling centre that we have at Stranraer, there will be an opportunity next subcommittee, which is the 10th of October. Our intention will be to have the subcommittee held at Stranraer, the offices in Stranraer. But prior to that meeting, there'll be a visit to the MBT, to the HWRC and Zero Waste Park. And what you'll see there, for those of you that haven't been, is a split level facility, which is not what we have at obviously the Lochamoth site. The Dumfries site's a bit kind of dated, lack of space. The split level site allows much simpler tipping of the bulkier materials into skips from a height, simpler to do, simpler for the users. So the proposals is to have a new HWRC, a dry recyclates building. That's the building which will receive the RCVs with paper, card, metals and plastics, and do an element of processing of those materials. We're proposing a bulky waste building, so that will take larger items, and it'll also have the opportunity to take commercial waste reception. So we're looking at the potential at Dumfries and the three other sites, Coursehill at Annan, the Castle Douglas site at Abercrombie, and the Stranraer site where there's Weybridge is available to offer a commercial waste reception facility service. So that would be taking, tradesmen, such like vehicles over and being able to deposit waste. It also allows us to bulk that kind of waste. It's more efficient for us to take green waste off in a 40-ton vehicle than it is in skips. So if we can bulk it ourselves and then run it off in a 40-ton vehicle, we save costs like that. We're looking to to house the RCV fleet at the Zero Waste Park. So fueling, washing, if they're going to be used for different waste streams, we need to make sure the vehicles are kept clean, and some minor workshop. Office accommodation, clearly, linking the MBT to the Zero Waste Park site because they're adjacent to each other. Obviously internal access roads. And the final one is probably one of the ones of most interest, but it's something we have at Stranraer, and again we would hope to include this in the visit. But a reuse facility is taking in material that wouldn't be classed as waste but can be avoided from going through the waste, with the opportunity to repair or maybe just clean it up and then sell it on through a facility that would be run by an outside organisation, so a charity organisation. So not dissimilar to the likes of British Heart Foundation coming and collecting, like a sofa or a washing machine or something like that. This would allow people, instead of dropping it into a skip, to place it in a skip, place it in a container, could then be repurposed. With the Zero Waste Park, there's a couple of things here. Start with this one first. Since 2012, there's obviously been a number of changes in the waste collection, treatment and disposal service. There were a couple of facilities identified for the Zero Waste Park, a small particle treatment facility and a large particle treatment facility. Principally, these were to take waste from take the outputs from the MBT and undertake further processing. What we're finding, and we'll come onto this a little bit when we discuss sort of opportunities, what we're finding is there's much more of a need to look at simpler processing for waste. So we're seeing energy from waste facilities becoming much more a popular option in Scotland to deal with the waste, with the landfill ban coming in. a lot of that waste is taken straight as black bag waste. So curbside collection takes out recyclates. Black bag waste is then turned into energy from waste. So doing a lot of processing to produce waste streams. One of the examples would be that a small particle treatment facility would be taking out a glass fraction as a product out of the waste that would come out of the MBT. That's fine, but as you're now aware, with DRS coming in, the glass is no longer going to be so much in the waste stream. So building a plant that's going to take small amounts of glass out at the end of a process becomes less effective. So we're looking at simplifying the process so the MBT wouldn't require to have the small and large particle treatment facilities. Composting facility. Composting is something that we looked at Stranraer, and the costs of doing the composting over the benefits that can be obtained from such a small facility are just there. The economies of scale are just are not effective. So a composting facility for Dumfries is not seen as a cost-effective way of composting in dealing with green waste. In terms of the composting, we would still be looking at composting. It would just be our material would be taken to much larger producers of compost, so much bigger facilities that can deal with it. Also, the MBT deals with green waste. I think when we had the presentation from Dave at the MBT, he was saying obviously the facility changes a lot during the summertime. We see a lot of compostable material coming in there. But that still becomes a potentially, through the drying process, it'll either degrade fully or it'll end up as some form of energy from waste in terms of maybe the more woody elements to it. What that does allow is that the site's obviously been sized to the land available. What that's done, and the reason in part why full detailed costs aren't coming to committee next week, is that we through discussions with colleagues in property and architectural services have looked at whether the layout for the MBT, for the zero waste park can be designed such that the space that wouldn't be used for those processes can be used for other council facilities that perhaps align with, I use the word synergies. I don't like to use the word synergies, but I've used the word synergies to the waste service. So things like ground maintenance, roads depot, anything which needs a good road access, that's a process that wants to be kept away from the town, vehicle maintenance, these kind of things. It's about, you'll be aware, rationalising our facilities across the region, reducing to the number. So we own this piece of ground. We're going to use some of it for the waste process. That has to be our priority. But if we've got spare land, can it be used for something else as well? So this is a plan at the moment of the site, and I don't know whether a mouse works on here, but yeah, it does. So down here is the Eco Deco facility at the bottom left-hand corner, and to the out with the plan, but below that is the area where you came in. So we were at the bottom side of that site. So just quickly talking through what we would be looking for within the facility. So there's a new access off the A709. You'll be aware of that. There's a new right turn lane there on the A709. Come in here. There's a sort of slip road prior to the roundabout, which takes people off into the HWRC, and a potential reuse facility up here. So the reuse facility is something is a little bit down the line at the moment. And you drive through the facility, the low-level skips are here, and material could be put into those, which gives simple access to the site staff to remove these skips with vehicles and bulk them up. Any vehicles coming in, so RCVs, or you saw the move and flow vehicle today, any vehicle coming in that way would come straight through the roundabout, across the weighbridge, and either in around the back and in through the recycling facilities. So that would take paper and card, metals and plastics, and sort those and store those, bulk those up. Or if it was an RCV with residual waste, it would come round this way and into the MBT from the other direction. It would then weigh out and either park up or be taken away. The bulky facility at the back here is for the larger items that can either be potentially reused or disposed of through the MBT, or disposed of in other ways, shredded and such like. What this does allow is that this area here and this area here remain available land for other facilities going forward. So the slight redesign of the park saw I'm pointing at the screen myself, and that's a bit stupid. So these two facilities move back, the recycler facility and the bulky facility, move back in the site, and leaving space at the front for potentially other facilities. So we are obviously needing to communicate some of this message going forward, and agreed at committee in July was setting out a plan to have a new collection service, and discussing this with members of the public, and we agreed going to all wards for that. At the same time, we discussed and agreed that bin size choice would be something that would be taken to the public, because there was a feeling that bin size, there would be concerns over having 3 240-litre bins, that's a normal size wheelie bin, would be a problem. I've put in brackets under consideration there, and the reason for that is that we've had quite a lot of discussion in the team around this, the need to look to make savings going forward. So it's not just about savings within this service, within what we're developing at the moment, but going forward. If we start to slip the collection, so the potential to slip a collection service to a longer distance, so at the moment it's every 4 weeks for your dry recyclates. If that went to every 6 weeks, the less capacity you have in your bin at this stage, the less option is available to do that. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. That's not my decision. This is a committee decision. This is discussion. This is where we need to take advice from Zero Waste Scotland. This is where we need to look to what's going to be in these bins going forward. All these kind of things need, flexibility in the system. But if we put out there the option of a smaller bin, a 140-litre bin for your dry recyclates, then there's a lot of cost in putting out 140-litre bins instead of 240s. If people fill those too regularly, we're going to be switching them out. If we extend the collection frequency, then they're going to need to hold the dry recyclates for longer. It's these kind of discussions. So we may change the approach on this, and this is where this is for discussion. We may change the approach on, we're not going to stop people asking for a 140-litre bin, but we may not promote it as such. It'll be if somebody specifically requests a smaller bin for dry recyclates. And one of the things we're going to target through the waste collection service is the properties that currently have a smaller bin for residual waste. That might be the place where we go for a smaller bin for dry recyclate. We're going to consult on HWRC opening hours and on trade waste disposal options. Members of EEI will remember that we had intended doing the events in September and October and across all 12 wards. What we've done, we've actually delayed this events into October, November. Those are currently being booked up by the team, and we would hope to come out with information on those. The reason for that is that there's a transformation event proposed during the week commencing the 23rd of September, which is looking at future savings in the service, and we didn't want the two to overlap, so we pushed the public engagement events, the community conversations into October, November. One of the things that we are considering, and that's a new thing, a very small amount of capacity within the trade waste collection service for dry recyclates. So at the moment, we collect dry recyclates from trade waste, from traders. So we collect paper and card, and we collect metals and plastics. What we're looking at doing is seeing whether there would be an interest, maybe from members of this committee, maybe from other people within the community, but targeting probably the Stewartry area where we have capacity, some capacity within the trade waste service. So what we would do is we'll give you 2 additional wheelie bins, and you can start trialling whether you can wash and clean your cans and plastics and put them in one bin, and whether you can put your newspaper and cards in another bin and see how you get on with it. Personally, I've been trialling it. Janice got me a couple extra bins, and I've started getting a bit obsessive about it now. And I'm only putting my wheelie bin out every 2 weeks as a consequence, and seeing whether it works, and it is working. So I know it's achievable, but we just thought it may be an opportunity for a few people to try that out and see how they get on. The transformation events. This is what I agreed at committee earlier in the year. And one of them was a transformation event covering recycling and litter. Litter isn't within this responsibility; it's another team within the service. but I'll mention it anyway. But it's a single, well, it's two events, 23rd and 27th of September. And the number of key questions you can see there: how do we increase recycling participation, increase reuse participation, stop creating waste, reduce waste collection costs, reduce waste disposal costs. So the aim is 15% savings on a proposed service. So that's not on the service we currently operate, but the proposed service, the one we're looking to roll out. So this isn't about targeting these savings immediately. It sort of seems a bit strange to be looking at savings for something we haven't yet rolled out, but this is the point, this is the issue with regards to the size of the wheelie bins. You know, if we take a decision now that 30% of the population gets smaller wheelie bins because that's what they think they want, and then we extend the collection frequency to reduce costs on collection, they haven't got enough capacity in those bins, and then we need to provide them a new bin. So it's that flexibility that we're needing to build in. Attendance is senior leadership team, communities of interest, so Friends of the Earth, Dumfries Recycling Initiative, Shacks, the kind of people that the chair has been engaging with recently. Registered social landlords, because there's obviously a big impact upon flatter development in terms of what bins can be provided. And I know Janice has been working with one of the registered social landlords on a trial of communal bins for dry recyclates. Technical support, so we have SEPA and Zero Waste Scotland for the litter. Keep Scotland Beautiful, I think, are invited as well. Engagement with the workforce, and I think the way the events work is the chair and vice chair of the committees, which in this case would be both communities and waste sub, would be an invite to. I think I'm not 100% sure. I'm not directly involved in organising this. I'll be there, but I think they're invited towards the end of the event to get the feedback on how it's gone. So I guess this is some of the discussion we wanted to have on the savings. So as I said, there's a budget shortfall of it in the order of 600,000, and there's a number of options, and I'm going to discuss each of these. So efficiencies in the operation of the Eco-Deco MBT facility, seeking income from selling capacity in the MBT, reducing revenue by investment in energy production, reduction in off-take costs due to diversion of dry recyclates, reduced operating hours, and employment of trade waste officer. So, in terms of the MBT, what Dave discussed with you this morning was the different waste streams that come off the MBT and the costs associated with disposal of those waste streams. So, he talked about the SRF production, solid recovered fuel, and he talked about refuse-derived fuel, RDF production. At the moment, the plant is set up to produce SRF. Our current offtake costs for SRF are about £77 a tonne. So we pay £77 a tonne to dispose of that, plus haulage costs. RDF is about £92 a tonne, so about £15 a tonne different. We produce about 18,000 tonnes of SRF. If we don't produce SRF, it all goes RDF, so it's more expensive to dispose of, but it's not requiring the same processing within the facility. And it's these balances as to whether you turn off that part of the production line and make a simpler product to get rid of. What we're finding is, having done a prior information notice for energy from waste, so we put out to the market, we said, we have this coming off our MBT, who is interested in taking it, who's interested in taking our waste in terms of particularly around energy from waste facilities. And some of them come back and said, we're only interested, or we would be happy to take black bag waste, i.e. don't run it through the MBT at all. And we suspect this is probably because facilities are set up to take black bag waste in the rest of the country because nobody else operates an MBT. If we look at the figures that we're talking about, at the moment it's about 52,000 tonnes going through the MBT, so that'd be 52,000 tonnes straight to an energy from waste plant. Now that won't happen because we wouldn't be allowed to do that until we implement a curbside collection service, until we take out the recyclates. Once we take out the recyclates, let's say we go down to about 42,000 tonnes of black bag waste, and we put that straight to an energy from waste facility, whether that's locally built or whether that's transferred somewhere else in the country. Or we could shred and dry it. So the process that you saw when you were at the MBT, where it comes in, it gets shredded, it gets dried through the drying hall, and that takes it down by about 30%. So there's a cost in doing that, but you've reduced the volume that you're taking to the energy from waste facility. So if you're paying £80 a tonne for it to be burnt, then if you can reduce it by 30%, then you obviously save a lot of money on what's being burnt, because you're only moving you're only moving 70% of the waste around. So this is why, when you look at that slide, it's saying undertake no refinements at all, just shred and dry the waste, or no treatment at all, just burn the black bag waste. So these are the kind of things where, and when you discuss this, you're getting into the discussions around who's going to invest in an energy from waste plant in Dumfries, how long are they going to want to sign us up to a contract for, because I suspect there'll be some reluctance to a certain extent of long-term contracts that, buy us into, well, we've agreed it's going to cost us £70 a tonne to get rid of black bag waste, or £60 a tonne to get rid of RDF, and we sign up to a 7-year contract because that company needs that investment. But in 4 years' time, suddenly, there's so many energy from waste facilities that they're actually paying more money. They're reducing their gate fees, and it's that balance as to where we go. This needs further review. This needs further discussion. So seeking capacity, Dave said to you this morning, the current capacity is 70,000 tonnes within the MBT. The current input is 52,000 tonnes. If we drop 9,000 tonnes from dry recycle collection, that reduces it down to 43,000 tonnes. Is there more we can take through? Can we take it from other local authorities? Can we take it from other traders, from Armstrong's Rope Bank? I mean, Armstrong's run the landfill site at Auchinlosh. That will close in a period of time to reflect the closure of landfill sites, or it'll close to certain waste streams. So is there potential to take some of that? But that only works if the processing and offtakes are more efficient to do it that way. And also if we tie into, say, taking material from another local authority and the MBT shuts down for a period of time, we probably have a legal commitment to continue to take their waste, but what are we doing with it? So it's only really viable to consider this once we've decided on the whether we're continuing with the refinements and the offtakes made. So it's one for thought, for discussion. This one's a little bit simpler. Current usage at the MBT is about £25,000 per month on electricity. Providing solar panels on the landfill site might be a viable alternative. Quick back of the fag packet calculations have shown it's probably got a reasonable payback period for doing this, because it's a direct wire into our facility. The problem, I understand it, and I'm certainly not going to claim to be any expert on this, but if the MBT wasn't using all that electricity, there isn't capacity in the network to take the waste electricity, to take the electricity that's being produced. And I think I'm right in saying that solar panels you can't just sort of not use them. The electricity has to go somewhere. They're heating up. They get rid of the electricity through the network. If there's no way to put it, you can't kind of just stick it back into the ground or something like that. You need to get rid of this energy. So we would need to ensure that any waste energy, any excess energy had an output. Now, we discussed this morning, the chair made the observation that battery storage might be an option for waste energy, and that certainly would be something we can consider, but clearly there's a significant capital investment in battery storage. The technology is changing all the time. When do you buy into this? You'll see the statement needs further review. It appears a lot on these slides. A reduction in offtake costs, and this will happen as without a doubt. So we have some value in the offtakes, in the plastics and metals, in the paper and card. These prices fluctuate. How much we get for them depends on the quality of them, depends on the market, depends whether we can bulk them up or not. But if you imagine it costs, I think Moira was saying this morning, it's £93 a tonne landfill charges plus transport costs plus any additional gate fee for disposal. You can take this out and you're actually selling the product. You take out 7,000 or 8,000 tonnes from the MBT. Even at the cheaper levels of the sort of 50, 60, 70 pounds a tonne for offtakes from the MBT, if you can take out a lot of this waste through dry recyclates, then you're going to be starting making savings, and good savings. And I'm talking about this from a money point of view. I'm not. Councillor Carruthers this morning made the point that we should be talking about this from an environmental point of view, and of course we should be talking about it from an environmental point of view. But I think at times that message sometimes gets lost. I think when you can talk about it from a money point of view, it shows it's not just environmentally sound to do it. There's a monetary benefit to doing it as well. I was told my son was wrong. If my son's wrong, I'll correct it when we publish this. We'll move swiftly on. I think I took both off instead of adding one. We talked about HWRC hours at the last committee, in the 14th of May committee. So operating the smaller sites on 6 hours, which allows single person operation, and the larger sites on longer hours. And that would be something we would look to do as through the community engagement, community conversation events, and seek some feedback on that. I've said there 12 o'clock till 5:45. In fact, the reason why we shut it 15 minutes early, that 15 minutes off the 6 hours, is to allow the operator time to clean the site up and get it closed. It's probably more likely we would say 12:15 to 6 o'clock, because people turn up at 5:45 thinking it's open till 6. It's a bit of a pain. If you turn up at 12 and you think it's open at 12, but it's open at 12:15, you probably don't mind hanging around 15 minutes. So just that shutting it on the hour might be the change to that. But the other option is to maybe look to later opening hours in the summertime. So instead of being 12 till 6, it would be 1 till 7, because people are working more into the evenings in the summertime. So these kind of discussions have some flexibility in that approach. But it's principally about harmonising the hours, make sure there's a sort of fairness across the sites, but also an efficiency in hours, and having them open a Saturday, Sunday, Monday allows the people who've worked at the weekend in their gardens or in their house to dispose of material on a Monday. But again, open to suggestions. It's a reasonable amount of savings on the service. And I've discussed before the development of trade waste disposal facilities. So this would be the opportunity for traders to dispose of waste at cost, but that keeps it out of the HWRCs. So the issues that we have, that people are turning up with large vehicles, they're clearly turning up on a regular basis, that difficulty in challenging that to show that it's a trade going. The person who turns up with a trailer with grass cuttings and garden waste in it, and he happens to have his lawnmower in the back as well, and you're thinking that's probably not your average householder, but it becomes that sort of challenge. So we don't have much control over, we don't have much sort of policy on who can enter our HWRCs, and that to tighten that up, move stuff away from the HWRCs and moves it into taking the trade. This is something that's quite an interesting one. Employment of trade waste officers. The council's required to offer a trade waste service, so anybody that requests collection of trade waste, we have to offer that service. It's not one we can not do. We can offer it at cost. It's not a subsidised service. We have to have costs for it. And it currently on the budget creates an income of in the order of 1.5 million. But over the last few years, we've seen a reduction in the businesses in the trade. I'm not suggesting that this is something that we are looking to just go out and hit hard. I think we need to be mindful that we're operating a service that's supporting small and medium-sized businesses across the region, but we are also operating a service where we have vehicles going out. The move to some of the business we lost was because the curbside loaders in the Wigton area don't allow us to collect trade waste. They don't have bin lifts on them and things like that. So if you've got a wheelie bin full of metals and plastics, you can't empty that into a curbside loader. Going to RCVs allows us to re-establish that trade and support with fair charges for smaller businesses. There's also the issue that probably some smaller businesses are taking advantage of the fact that they just put a wheelie bin out in front of their property and it's picked up by the council and seen as household waste, which we have a legal duty to collect. That's a loss of income for the council, but it's also it's a loss of income from actually being able to charge for that service, but it's also a cost to us because we also need to dispose of that waste. So it's a sort of double loss, I guess. It's an opportunity to not necessarily be their waste supply provider. They could go externally. We could turn around to them and say, "Where's your trade waste disposal route license?" They say, "Well, I haven't got one." We can say to them, "Well, you need to have one. We can either provide this service for you, you can go elsewhere." If they go elsewhere, we lose the income, but we also lose that waste out of the waste stream. We don't have to process that waste at our cost. So looking to employ an officer would look to develop the appropriate charging mechanisms and follow that route. And just kind of winding up on this and just discussing one of the reports that we're looking at the moment for the 10th of October, which will go to Communities Committee after that. We have a road end policy, which has not been fully adopted. It was adopted in the Wigton area, principally around foot and mouth issues and access along tracks. So actually the Wigton area, generally waste from smaller properties or from single or small number of properties up single track roads is collected at the end of the road, but the other three areas doesn't have that. That has consequences, and the sort of safety recommendations are to move away from any reversing vehicles, and often on narrow roads with soft shoulders on the sides of the roads. We have the instance like you see there on the screen. So in addition to improving the safety, which is obviously the priority in this regard, if we're buying a new RCV fleet, it's bad enough sticking I don't know what plate that is, 12 plates, a 7-year-old vehicle, but sticking a brand new vehicle on its side is going to be even worse. There are also time and fuel savings to be made. I think we're talking in the order of, was it 60 or 70,000 pounds of savings on routes, annual savings on routes by not going up some of these narrow roads. It wouldn't be a blanket decision. It would be discussed individually with each community. It may involve the provision of communal bins or a group of bins, some storage facility at the end of the roads. But it's something which is more prevalent in other areas, out with Dumfries and Galloway. So something we would look to bring to this committee. I think just to pick up what I said before, next meeting is proposed to be in Stranraer. It involves, we would like a visit to the Zero Waste Park, and that would include the HWRC, so you can see that facility there. It would also involve visiting the bulky waste facility, so you can see the food waste, dry recyclates and the residual waste. For those of you on EEI committee, or who attended the members' seminar in April, you'll remember that the food waste collection service in the West is quite a manual process and quite a messy process when the vehicles come to tip. The change in vehicles that we're proposing would avoid that, but the opportunity to see the current process that's required would be a bit of an eye-opener, I think. Dry recyclates and residual waste are bulked at Stranraer as well, and an opportunity hopefully to see the reuse facility. It requires, I'm saying this now so you can note this down, but it requires PPE. We can provide hard hats and high-vis jackets if you don't have, but it's best if you have your own safety boots. So if there's an issue with that, well, I'm sure we can get that sorted. But I suspect most of you will have safety boots. But I think it's worth getting into the buildings to see what's going on. If you don't, you've got until the 10th of October to mind a bit. And I'll leave it at that. There were no questions during the presentation, but happy to take any questions now or open up the discussion.
Okay, thanks very much for that, James. I mean, that was quite a lot of information coming over there for the whole setup of the waste strategy implementation update. I think some of the issues that will come up, obviously, we have discussed, for instance, and excuse me taking chairman's sort of questions first, but there's a few sort of questions came up. Are there any discussions with planning? Because we're looking at over 1,000 new homes in Dumfries and Galloway over the next number of years. And if I remember correctly, we've never really thought about that when new homes come into play with planning, what discussions are ongoing with that side of things. there's technology that you mentioned on the new vehicles, and one of the areas where we do get complaints is where people have said that they've left their bin outside their house and they haven't, and they've got to go back and you've got to pick it up, which again is an extra cost to the council. So is that technology mean CCTV as well? And I think you're right in saying it fits in with climate emergency planning. And obviously, I'd like to thank Dumfries Recycling Project, the Eco Warriors, the Friends of Earth Dumfries, and the Solway Coast Partnership for actually being involved in discussing some of these things with us. And I think it's really important that we do involve our communities. We have got a look at the environment. And there was one other question, James, which was, my understanding was that they were going to look for a compliance officer rather than a trade waste officer. Is that the same person? So 3 questions for me, or 3 or 4 questions for me, then I'll go into members.
In relation to future homes, we've been working with the planning officers, and we are included in that some capacity to accommodate the additional houses in the new routes that we're looking at to implement. So we have been working with that. It's been dealt with. With regards to the CCTV and the cameras, some of our newer vehicles have actually got some of these cameras retrofitted, 360 cameras on the vehicles, but it's something that would be included in the new fleet. Also with an inclusion of an in-cab, sort of slab-in-cab idea, where if people are putting out bins or contamination, the crews on board can easily record that against the address, and that information will then feed through to our contact centre through the lagging process. And vice versa, if a bin wasn't out, they can record that information, so if the customer phones up, say if a bin's been missed, we know that it's not been out, and we can check the footage going back. Okay.
Yeah, with respect to the compliance officer, we're looking, there's a couple of posts, there's a health and safety post and an officer within the waste team to look at the procurement officer. We would look to the procurement officer to address some of the compliance issues in terms of where our waste goes. Both, I think the health and safety officer is currently, we've got applicants in and we're reviewing that. I don't think it's been interviewed yet. Compliance officer is something we've not got to yet.
Jim, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. The deposit return scheme, James, can you confirm that it only applies to glass bottles and not plastic?
The DRS scheme as has been put forward, and this hasn't got approval from, hasn't gone through statute, but it's glass bottles, it's PET, so that's plastic with the number 1 on the bottom, so generally Coke bottles, drinks bottles like that, but not HDPE, which is milk bottles. So there is milk's obviously a big user of plastic, and Coke and such like are a big user of plastic, but it is Coke bottles principally. And then, what's the other ones for DRS? God. Cans, single-use drinks cans. So Coke cans and the like would be within DRS. So it's 20 pence deposit on all is what is proposed at the moment. There is the potential that HDP will come in, but it's not definitive as yet.
Thank you. I've got another question on DRS. We have a number of small shops in Dumfries and Galloway, and the concern of these shopkeepers is that they will be required to pay deposits on bottles handed in to them which were not purchased in their establishment.
That is our understanding of DRS as well, from the information we've had from Zero Waste Scotland, that if you sell a product, then you have to take products back, so small retailers will be expected to store their returned products before it's collected, and then the deposits are returned to them. So that's how we understand it will work. But in my defence, we are not proposing or operating the DRS scheme. So if there's detailed questions from people, then we would defer them to or refer them to the Zero Waste Scotland website, which provides the current information that's available on the proposals. But they are still to be developed in some detail.
There is genuine concern that this scheme could put a number of small shops out of business.
I mean, I can see that. I can see that concern. I think it's something that Zero Waste Scotland, the Scottish Government, are going to have to address going forward with the scheme and take feedback from that. And obviously, there's been different representations to DRS from different interest groups. So the main recyclers, the glass people, and things like that, as to whether it should be included or shouldn't be included. But it is a system that operates in other countries, across Europe, and there's been a lot of visits, as I understand, to see how other systems work. Some larger facilities will use reverse vending machines that will scan the bottle or can and determine whether it's eligible to deposit and provide a deposit in that way and store the material in that regard. But in smaller shops, it will be a case of storing the waste as we understand it until it's collected, at which point the funding comes back into the business. But I suspect once it starts rolling, it will, the payback will come quite quickly in how much you collect.
Just say, Jim, on that particular thing, obviously these sort of questions are being asked not just by our council, but COSLA and APSI are asking the same question. At the Aviemore conference in May, Zero Waste Scotland came up to do a presentation on the DRS, and there was a lot of questions there that they really couldn't answer because it was at the start of the consultation, and hopefully they'll get some answers to that. I mean, one of the questions was, quite rightly, we have a lot of school children who have free school meals, and in that free school meal may be a plastic bottle or a can or something like that. Who gets the deposit return from that? If we're paying for it as a local authority, as an education authority, then surely that should come to us. But that's the type of questions that were coming forward. But I understand your concern about local businesses, and again, James is quite right. This is about our process here. Zero Waste Scotland are the people to, and the Scottish Government are the people to ask that side of things. Katie, you want to go on?
Thank you for that, and thank you, James, for your presentation this morning. I do feel that I'm in a fortunate position that I was on EEI, so I've had the information, so I sort of feel for the members that weren't on EEI, it's a lot of information to take on board today. Looking at the remit of the waste strategy, we agreed that we're looking to make recommendations back to Communities Committee, and I'm just aware that you had mentioned there in your presentation that there will be a report going to Finance, Procurement and Transformation for 8.2 million. Now, looking back at the committee on the 2nd of July, we did agree that a report would go back to the PNR or successor, which is what's happening, but once these investment requirements have been clarified. So I'm looking, will there be a clarification report? Because obviously we're looking as a waste subcommittee in developing this, but we've still not had the actual details of what that's made up. And it's not coming to us, but if it's going to the finance, the new committee, will they get that information? And also we did note on the 2nd of July that there would be clarity before that committee paper on what funding or what ongoing funding we've received from Scottish Government. So has that clarity been received as yet? Because it was noted that we would have that clarity before. And I appreciate there's a new structure for all the committees, but it's trying to slot in where we as a committee, what is our remit in terms of the finance and getting that fine detail, because clearly we're looking to feedback to communities, but where's our role in terms of finance of this new scheme? So if there's any clarity, that would be really useful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is slightly unfortunate that in terms of the new committee structure, we've seen this subcommittee meeting a week before finance committee, meeting a week before communities committee, And I thought it was important that we got to, the team's very much taking the approach that we want to get the investment that's needed, particularly in the waste collection service. So the investment in the new fleet of vehicles is something that we've been pushing for some time now, but with an understanding of the costs for every other part of the service. So what will come to Finance Committee next week will detail the required investment in the fleet, and as I said, how we would manage that within the revenue budget that we have for waste collection. So there's efficiencies to be made that will generally cover the cost of investing in the new fleet. There is still a requirement, and we did say in July that we wish to have the confirmation from Scottish Government of the continued funding arrangements. That hasn't been achieved, as in we haven't got the finalised agreement to that, and that's something which is within the committee report that will go next week. Will say that there is still ongoing discussions with regards to the finance of this. I guess what the message that we have put in the committee report to next week is that if we are looking to Scottish Government to continue the funding streams that it currently does, us sending the message that we are investing in, curbside collection service, looking to become code compliant, looking to, take on the challenges that are given to us in terms of, increasing what's being recycled from our waste. If we give that commitment, then surely that can be seen as sending the right message to Scottish Government, rather than stepping back and saying, we don't, we can't afford to do this. So we officers, head of finance, my head of service, Stephen, are still engaged in discussions with Scottish Government in that regard, and I believe that's something that's been looked at a national level. But the way our committee report is structured for next week, it's we're still continuing with the investment within the service, but it is looking to needing to clarify the funding from Scottish Government. As to the role of this subcommittee, it's new to all of us. It's certainly I see it as an opportunity to engage and to share the challenges that the authority faces in delivering a flexible, a cost-effective waste collection service, a waste service collection and disposal, treatment and disposal service, for then these reports to be taken to Communities Committee for the decision making in that regard. But the agreement at the last EEI, which was obviously the forerunner to the Community Committee for this service, was to get to Finance Committee as soon as possible to get the investment agreed. So there is two lines within the finance report: one to invest in the vehicles, one to look to note the potential cost of the zero waste park and to continue the development of that. But whatever happens, if we go to the nuclear option, I guess, of just continuing to collect bag waste, we need a new RCV fleet to do that. The fleet is between 7 and 15 years old. We're running out of duct tape to hold this fleet together.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the very detailed presentation from James. Similar vein, I suppose. One small question, I'll come to that then, but similar vein to what Councillor Hageman has just raised there. So I missed the last couple of Economy, Environment, Infrastructure committees. I came off it, but I'm back on the relevant committee. So I'm on Communities, FPT, and this committee. Keen to get involved and see it goes forward. So look at the recommendation today under 2.3. I'm just wondering, how do we collectively put that together? I suppose from my perspective, James, you referred to the Finance Procurement Transformation Committee as a report going there. That as an appendix, even as a draft, probably would have helped me understand this. Okay, we've seen it as a draft, made comment in regards to the draft. Haven't seen that yet, obviously. So I'm just, how do we collectively, going back to the remit of this particular, so it's new to everybody, so we're right at the start, it's a learning point. How do we put our point of view? Because we've had a very detailed, to say the least, presentation. Took notes, mental notes, in particular for myself, left my pencil through there, but it's how do we then collect that information, say, okay, this is what our viewpoint is going forward. I'll find it quite difficult today, Chairman, being honest. One small question, I was looking through that, I take it, so we bought a lot of vehicles years ago. It's only just for my own information, really. But we bought a load of RCVs. They were multi-collection vehicles, and it looks like for the option 2, the option going forward, they'll just be redundant. Quite a few of them were never used. Is that the case?
In terms of the curbside loaders that were bought for the region, they've all been used because we've recycled them through the Wigton area, so they continue to be used. They're a number of years old now, and the experience that we've had with them in the Wigton area, they will not form part of the collection service moving forward. So that was the information that was presented to the 14th of May subcommittee committee, EEI committee, that these vehicles have effectively, they're five years old. They have been used, not to the extent they would have been used if they'd been rolled out across the whole of the region. But our experience from that, the changes in the waste, in waste strategy development in general, particularly the forthcoming DRS, sees that the advantages of curbside sorting and collecting in that kind of vehicle and the manual intervention, the sort of impacts upon operatives in terms of lifting boxes and loading them at curbside, the benefits of having single compartment RCVs far outweighs that. From my point of view, taking this is about moving forward. I know this has been discussed in other forums as to what were the decisions being made. That's fine. Our view, taking this as a whole, is that the way forward is with a single-bodied RCV is the most efficient and effective, and it leaves us with one vehicle effectively to, one type of vehicle. If we get a breakdown, we just switch it in with another vehicle. So that's where we're taking that forward.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, as Ian said, there was a lot of information. What was a very good presentation. I think it would be useful if you could actually send the slides out to everybody. So rather than looking at the scribbled notes, which I have, you've got the hard and fast details, and possibly to all members of the council as well, because they are going to be asked questions about what's being planned and what sort of tonnage we're using, etc. I know community councils quite often gets raised in terms of what's happening in terms of these waste collection services, etc. But in terms of the food waste collection across the 6 postcodes, is that optional? Because I could imagine, certainly in blocks of flats, etc., it would be quite difficult, even to clean out the caddies after you've disposed of it, wherever it goes. If you don't have a outside water supply, there might be a reluctance to actually join in with it.
James?
I mean, opting in as an individual to any of the waste collection services that are present in this country is you opt in. If you don't want to recycle, you stick it all in your wheelie bin. You can drag it to the HWRC. In general, a move towards reduced frequency of residual waste collection means that unless you recycle, you're going to run out of capacity in your wheelie bin quite quickly. In terms of food waste, the food waste service comes with compostable bags as part of the caddy supply. So you're putting food into a compostable bag, which is then taken from your kitchen caddy to your outside caddy, and then it's disposed of from the outside caddy. So you're not actually putting food waste directly into the caddies. So yes, you are going to have to wash them out as you would your wheelie bin, but if you're just putting a black bag in your wheelie bin, then the amount of contamination, the amount of washing out you need to do is going to be less frequent. But if there's an inability to or an unwillingness to engage in that, then food waste will continue to go into the wheelie bin as people will choose to do. It is, I understand from Zero Waste Scotland, the material which is least recycled, of the waste streams. It's the one that suffers from least recycling. But they are obviously putting a campaign that, from our point of view, in terms of collecting it from the rural areas and not wanting to do that for financial and environmental reasons, we would look to push the options for home composting or even wormeries, which can deal with more food waste, for people to deal with it at an individual level rather than just putting it straight into their wheelie bin.
Just on that particular question on food waste, James, I think it was Councillor Scobie at the last ENI committee talked about anaerobic digesters and potentially using food waste for that. Have we had any discussions with any local anaerobic digester facilities?
At present, the food waste that we dispose of, Chair, is taken by one of the local waste companies to a facility in, I think it's the north east of England, to an anaerobic digestion plant there, and that's obviously the market has dictated that that's the lowest cost option. As to the benefits of developing anaerobic digesters within Dumfries and Galloway with the amount of food waste that we would collect, there probably isn't the economies of scale for just addressing food waste, but for addressing other waste, so farm waste and such like, then anaerobic digestion may be a viable option, but at present it's unlikely it'd be something that the local authority would invest in for the small amounts that we would collect.
Thank you very much. Lorraine?
Yes, in some of the social media earlier in the year around the changes in waste, there was a suggestion that people's bins would not be collected if they were too heavy, and that created a bit of an outcry because people didn't know when their bin would be too heavy. I just wondered if you could clarify what was meant. That was a little bit confusing, I think.
James?
I'd not seen that media post. Was there?
There was something. Yeah, there was a sort of Twitter storm about people's bins not being picked up because they were too heavy, and it seemed to have come from something that had been put onto social media. I think you actually dealt with a gentleman who didn't live in my constituency but got rather cross with me about it. But I was just really to clarify that, because obviously what might seem a heavy bin to an 80-year-old is not going to be a heavy bin to a 20-year-old, and there's obviously it's a health and safety issue about the operatives picking up heavy bins.
Yeah, I mean, it was a post that was put on Facebook. It received quite a number of responses, probably one of the most we received, in terms of questions like, well, how do I weigh my bin? How do I know if it's too heavy? I think it's, I suspect there was a lot of opportunity to make comment like that, but in reality, we would ask for some pragmatism from those disposing of waste in their wheelie bins. So disposing of things like bricks and rubble from your garden soil and things like that, this is not household waste. If you are having a bin collected every week and you are putting household waste from a family of 2 to 6 within a property, a 240 litre bin is sufficient. If you're putting other waste in there, so you've done a bit of DIY and you're throwing in some old plasterboard and stuff like that, then it's going to start getting heavy. If you feel as you're dragging the bin out, you're tipping it back onto your knee and it's taking a bit of effort to drag it, you're probably on the cusp of it being too heavy. This is no longer household waste. It's about a bit of sensibleness to this. And I appreciate that there is going to be a fine balance between is it too heavy or isn't it? But I think the vast majority of us would know when we tip a bin back that it is getting to that extent. Now, you could say, well, I can manage to drag it out, so why can't a bin man? If the bin man's dragging, a number 100 of these a day, then and they're overweight, then that's an impact upon the efficiency of the service and things like that. The bin lifters themselves in the back of the vehicles will give up at a certain level. Also, the bins have a tendency, if they're overloaded on a regular basis, they'll break, either fall into the vehicle or fall back onto the ground. So we need to avoid that. And finally, if you and I can confess I've done it, and I'm sure most other people have at some point. If you're having to jump inside your wheelie bin to compact the waste, to get everything in and get the lid shut, then that's probably a sign that you're putting too much in and, running it to an HWRC or paying for a bulky waste uplift. So 10 bags for £14, is it? 13, yeah, 10 bags for £13 is an alternative option.
Okay, thanks for that. There's no further questions, members. I might go to the recommendations, and forgive me, I should have seen this at the start. 2.3 should have been 2.1, which was agreed to have a presentation on the background to develop of the waste strategy, and then 2.1 should have been 2.2, and 2.2 should have been 2.3. All of them, 2.2 and 2.3 are for noting, and 2.1 is to agree to have the presentation. We've had it. So we don't do that any further. Are members content with the recommendations? Okay. Members, I have no further business. I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions to the meeting. Can I thank the staff for, first of all, having the MBT site visit this morning and your information during the presentation. I'd just like to remind members of the public that there are no committees allowed public forum apart from planning, in which you have to ask to do a presentation. Okay. Thank you very much, members. Sorry, Elaine.
Just wondered if you could clarify, like, just for the purposes of travel and diaries, what the next meeting, which you're saying is going to be in Stranraer, but maybe the times of the meeting and the visit, so that we can make sure it's diaried appropriately.
Yeah.
I'll probably drop this a little bit on the chair by this meeting, but we will discuss with the chair and members in general about what timing suits to get to Stranraer for a visit, and whether there were committee meetings later on in the day and things like that. But we're very flexible on it. As it happens, I'm not going to be there, but we will sort that. So if there's any feedback, just come back. And in terms of the presentation, a copy of this presentation will be sent out, and it will be published as part of the minute of the meeting.
Okay. Ian, do you want to come on?
Apologies, Chairman. So you've changed the recommendation around about which I fully understand, but my understanding of what's presented in the paper is 2.3, that we were to present our view. Our view of this committee was to be presented to Finance Procurement Transformation next week, but I just wondered how we did that as a mechanism, because we just agreed, we haven't really got into any detail of what our view is. We've had a presentation, we've asked a few questions, but I mean, I certainly would, even if it's just to support what's being presented as going forward, I think we should maybe formalise that.
Okay. So I think obviously there was questions during the presentation. Those questions have been noted, and the issues have been raised by the members have been noted. I think you're right, Ian. I think if we as a subcommittee support the report going forward to finance transformation, then that would be, are members happy with that? That we support the presentation and the report going through to finance transformation and whatever else it's called. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. We'll close the meeting.